Okay, so first things first, I have changed the name of this presentation. So it was design is not a department, but actually what I meant as I was putting this together is that user experience is not a department. In fact, in many organizations, user experience or user experience design is becoming a core foundational competency included on skills matrices for their employees, for everyone, not just designers and researchers, not just developers, but everyone, to not only care about the user experience, but really understand the foundational elements of that. So with that, I'm going to go back a second. So a couple things. First of all, who am I? I am Jen Cardello. I have been doing UX work for 23 years. I spent, let's see, 6 years at Nielsen Norman Group, working for Jacob Nielsen, doing a deep dive on learning user research. After that, I was at Athena Health, which is based in Watertown. It's a company that sells EHR, web-based software, to medical practices and hospitals. And currently, as of June, I'm at Fidelity. So my career has been focused on information architecture, interaction design, research, and teaching all of those things, and leading teams in conducting that work. How many people here have survived an agile transformation? How many people here have post-traumatic syndrome from going through an agile transformation? It's really intense. Business transformation is not for the lighthearted. And so what I'm going to focus on today is some of the things that I've learned and seen going through a couple transformations. So first at Athena, we started doing that in early 2016, and Fidelity has been on a transformation journey as well. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for getting through that time. So two major goals of business transformation, very, very simple. We're trying to deliver more value to customers, and we're trying to improve business outcomes. Those are the two foundational goals that we seek to change when we're transforming. Those are the things that should drive a company to say, I think I need to be more agile. And there's two things that we can do to achieve those. So first, figure out a way to amplify our capability around innovation. And second, accelerate execution. The second one is very interesting because it's what a lot of us end up focusing on as we go through transformation. So when we're transforming, we typically adopt an agile framework. Today we heard about an organization that's using SAFe. Many organizations use Scrum. There's many other frameworks that people can choose from, many flavors of agile that we can go with. But first and foremost, the important thing about agile or being agile is helping teams, helping individuals too within an organization learn to react to change very well. So being resilient. And there are a couple foundational principles to doing that. So first of all, having everyone have a growth mindset. And second of all, having the infrastructure and tooling to allow for people to behave in this way. But a lot of times we get caught up in the mechanics of a framework such as Scrum. So we're teaching teams about the mechanics of ceremonies and process. Sprints, backlogs, burn down charts, velocity, all of those types of things are what they end up studying in lieu of the most important elements of being agile, how to build resilience and how to have an approach to delivering more value and improving business outcomes. So really focusing on those ideas of amplifying innovation and accelerating execution versus just focusing on the delivery. I'm going to go back for a second because I want to show you something that I think is very interesting about this diagram. This is an excellent diagram. It actually shows you how Scrum works. That's awesome. Everybody look up in the right, or in the left, your left. Inputs from executives, teams, stakeholders, customers, users. And then all of a sudden, we jump to a backlog. What's missing? What is it? What is it? Funding, priority, research, feedback. What's the V word that's missing here? Vision, a North Star, an idea, like those types of things. What is feeding into this engine? If we don't focus on that primarily, then no amount of Scrum, no amount of SAFe or any Agile framework is going to save you. Because really the things that we need to be the best at is problem articulation and identification. Okay, so these are the things that we hear from team members. And these aren't just designers and experienced professionals that are talking about this. This is product owners too, engineers as well, subject matter experts, analysts. First, small increments are not adding up to big value. So people are very concerned. I get it. I know we work in 2-week sprints. I know we ship code on a regular basis, but I don't see what this is all adding up to. We need to help them fix that issue. We're solving the wrong problems, so concerned that they're not actually fishing where they need to fish. We're jumping to a solution too quickly. This is one we're going to stick on for a while because it's one of the biggest areas of angst and pain, particularly for designers and researchers. We're not aligned. We can't measure the impact of our work, and we don't have enough user insight. So the interesting thing about this is that design professionals, user experience professionals, have spent literally decades dealing with all 6 of those issues. So we have approaches and methods, we have journey mapping and empathy maps and research and all types of things that we've done over time to address this. But these things that we do don't fit neatly into that delivery framework. They don't fit into 2 weeks. So people say, well, we can't do that stuff. We don't have time for these things. So what do we need to do? As professionals, we need to adapt our approach to both how we design and also how we think about being agile. You know, how can we go about making sure that vision and priorities and alignment are accounted for? So here's 6 things that we'll go through that address those issues. Small increments, not adding up to big value. This is a typical model for how you would structure your teams. So you have a product or a business unit. You have a bunch of zones in which you group a bunch of Scrum teams. And what we typically focus on is how are we going to get those Scrum teams and squads the things that they need, the design that they need. But what's really important is that we're designing at all levels. So we're not just thinking about the 2-week sprint and the next piece of functionality or feature that needs to go out, but we're actually thinking about how all those things connect together and figuring out where we spend our dollars. Design, user experience is an investment that we need to get high return from. So when we think about aligning experience to that, we have experience leads at the business unit, design architects at a tribe and zone level, and product designers focusing on Scrum teams and squads. And on the previous screen, I included, first of all, a book by Peter Merholz and Kristen Skinner on org design, or designing for orgs, org design for design orgs, and an article by Scott Mackey at Athena Health about how we were addressing this in aligning teams and resources. So here we see experience leads to product designers looking at 10,000 feet to 1 foot. The types of things that they do, experience leads focusing on narrative tied to behavior metrics and outcomes. These design architects focusing on connecting experiences and holistic consistency and cohesion, thinking about service blueprints, journey maps, navigation strategy, and product designers being truly makers, loving creating concept prototypes, interactive prototypes, UI design, and sometimes even development. So this is the way that we can account for all the types of design that need to happen so that we don't have this idea that we just have incremental bits and pieces that don't add up to anything. We're solving the wrong problems. As I mentioned earlier, being able to identify and articulate problems is the most important capability of an organization. Whether you adopt any framework or not is really of no interest, or it's unimportant if you cannot get this right. If everyone in your organization isn't really good at defining crisply what a problem is and articulating that. So we have this framework that we talk about, right problem, right solution, done right. Right problem is about identifying and understanding these unmet needs of users. So one of the things that we use at Athena, and we also focus on at Fidelity, is jobs theory. And jobs theory is described very well in this book by Anthony Ulwick. You'll also read about it in Clay Christensen's books. But Tony Ulwick is the creator of jobs theory. And one of the things that he talks about is a way of measuring this called outcome-driven innovation, which is a qualitative and quantitative method for identifying the jobs of our users. What are the things that they need to get done? And then quantifying those unmet needs so that we can create what I call an opportunity backlog. This tells us where it's good to fish, and it's solution agnostic. It's a type of instrument that generates results that you can use from 3 to 5 years, maybe even longer, because it's not focused on features and functionality and technology solutions. What this does is generate data for us to understand where needs are overserved or underserved, so we can start to dig into these and do more research around that. We're jumping to a solution too quickly, so back to the framework. Like I said, this is the area where we see the most angst for designers and research professionals. When we jump to solutions, we often design research instruments that are intended to confirm the solution that we are trying to sell, either to ourselves, convince ourselves it's the right thing to do, or convince our leaders that it's the right thing to invest in. And for designers, it's a really ungrateful experience because you're being delegated a solution and told to execute on that. That doesn't feel good for anyone. And it's a particular problem because what we see is that people are falling in love with their solutions instead of falling in love with the problem. So we really need, that's another reason why it's important to spend time focused on the right problem, and also dedicating time to right solution. It's not a bad thing to call this out in the process, to allow for time to diverge broadly, to find solutions, many, many different types of solutions to this problem that you have vetted and validated. And then figuring out a way through qualitative research, maybe resonance testing, and then validating through a concept validation, quantitative instrument, where the best opportunities are that are resonating with users. The reason I focus on this a lot is because it's very important to tease apart two things in user testing: usefulness and usability. They are not the same thing. When we wait too long to put things in front of users and we're focused on task-based usability testing, oftentimes what we hear in that testing is feedback about the idea itself. But at that point, no one on the team wants to respond to that. They're like, yeah, I get it. I hear that they're saying this isn't really useful. But is the green button in the right place? So they're just not willing to let go of that. So the earlier we can take sacrificial concepts, put them in front of users as big, fat sketch marker, sketches, or little quick videos that we can make about concepts, the better off we are. Jeff Soro, the founder of Measuring You, talks about usefulness research. I've included a link here, but 1.5 times more important than ease of use. So if you think about that right problem, right solution, done right, you can do done right all day long. But if you're putting stuff out in the market that no one wants or needs, it doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter how high it rates in usability. So usefulness needs to be teased apart and done early. What we did at Athena was we used design sprints to ideate broadly. We used resonance testing to qualitatively narrow down concepts. We used a concept validation instrument that we developed that stole questions from the technology acceptance model, the TAM, to actually look at perceived usefulness, intention to use, and whether it met requirements. And then there were open fields to get more feedback. This instrument was able to build out a data mine for us so that we could start to build benchmarks for where we needed to sit with a concept early on to figure out if it had legs, if we should actually invest in it further and do more detailed design and move into that done right phase. We're not aligned. There are many, many ways in which teams need to be aligned. At the very topmost level, I'm going to focus on this. Establishing a standard product development lifecycle is key. This was the Athena PDLC. So discovery, experimentation, alpha, beta, GA. Very, very simple. But something like this gets all of your many hundreds of Scrum teams aligned on a common nomenclature of what they mean by where they are in the process. And it serves as a foundation upon which you can overlay your design process, outcomes, outputs, artifacts, your research process, your development process. It helps other people who aren't informed in this space understand the when and the how and the what. So this is the first place to start. Can we get agreement on how we move an idea through the system? And then you can overlay things like Jeff Gotthelf's model of Scrum framework plus UX design. How do we work within that model? The next thing is we can't measure the impact of our work. I stole this from Peter Merholz, who is amazing, and I highly recommend reading any of his books and his blogs. This is from a slide deck called 12 Qualities of Effective Design Organizations. This is critical. Designing a progressive algorithm to describe how you deliver value is incredibly powerful and empowering to a team. So they need to understand how they impact, how what they do impacts the organization. It helps them build their KPIs out and know what the outcomes are that they're seeking. So putting a model like this in place at the beginning of a project and saying, what's your problem statement? What are you going after? What are the behavior changes you're looking for? And what should that result in? Builds rigor into the system, but it also ensures that designers are being spent in the most valuable area, that we're not wasting that resource. And when those people put stuff in their portfolio, they can actually say what impact they had on an organization. The entire team can do that. We don't have enough user insight. Again, back to the framework, right problem, right solution, done right. What you need to do to avoid teams over-researching, so under-research it doesn't seem to be a problem in my life so far. I'm sure there's plenty of organizations where they don't talk to users and they don't find out what the problem is. What I've seen more of is teams saying, okay, we got to spend 6 months researching this before we really can make anything. And in an agile world, we really want to enforce this make-to-learn idea, that we are identifying and articulating assumptions and designing experiments in order to prove or disprove those hypotheses that we have. So we've got to get people to the idea of just enough research. What is the things that are holding you back from taking a step forward? And what can we test in market? With reducing risk by having slivers of customer bases. And what are the things we really do legitimately have to research up front and spend time doing that? So one of the ways that we do this is create a structured research engagement model. Oh boy. And so there's a series of tools and instruments that are both qualitative and quantitative that we move through this process to say, this is the foundation of what we can do for you. And there's a series of questions that we will answer using these methods and tools. And things that fall outside of this, we can investigate and come up with many, many other methods to do those things. But in some instances, we may be teaching you how to do those things instead of us doing it ourselves. So beyond building that structured engagement model is also figuring out how to democratize it. So there's supposed to be yellow lines on this, but things like, is there a laser here? User interviews, in-field observation, resonance testing, iterative usability testing, formative usability testing, where you're looking at, giving something to 5 users and asking them to complete some tasks. Those types of things, teams can do themselves, and they want to. Designers can do it, product owners are begging to do it. They oftentimes want the capability to do these types of things, so it's incumbent upon us to teach them and give them the tools and mechanisms to do this. We call this a research platform, and this is one of the things that we're building out. Yeah, there's the yellows. So those are just 6 ways to deal with some of these problems. I'm sure there's many, many more. Maybe we can talk over cocktails of things other people have found and rolled out. So to wrap up, transformation requires shifting our mindset. This is one of the most foundational things for user experience groups and why I don't think it's really a department anymore. So we used to be, this is the to and froms. We are the user experience team. Our job is to design experiences. Or for researchers, our job is to do the research. And what we need to move to is this idea that we're user experience coaches. And our job is to design experiences, but it's also to scale user experience capability throughout the organization so that everyone has that in their heart and in their mind, and they can execute on that very, very well. So a couple things. User experience doesn't live in only one department. UX is a critical capability that an entire organization must possess. And so we need to design and build systems to empower cross-functional teams to create user-centered solutions. We don't just design experiences, we create systems and platforms. And why the windmills? So this is a Chinese proverb that I found a few years ago when I started going through agile transformation. And people were reeling from the change. When the winds of change blow, some people build walls, others build windmills. We are windmill builders. That's what we do. Thanks.
Great. Jen, we've got a couple of questions here. First one, what happens at altitudes higher than product or business units? So for example, portfolio strategy. How does user experience fit in at those altitudes?
It depends on the company. So in many organizations, they've instituted roles of chief experience officers. They have, travelers, which are bands of roving strategic designers, very dangerous. But there are ways of addressing that. But really having a CXO or a chief design officer sitting in those meetings and knowing when those things are coming up, to be able to identify that lack of alignment, identify when two business units are actually going after the same user, going after the same problem, and connecting those dots and bringing the designers up and in to solve for that problem is very important, because that person can also reprioritize your backlog. So we might pull some designers off Scrum teams in order to make that type of work much more important and apply design principles to it so that we can have better outcomes.
Great. And our last question, what's the biggest executive-created blunder you've ever dealt with, without names, to protect the innocent?
Oh my gosh. That's tough. Yeah, so I think probably a lot of people have lived through reimaginings, like full burn it down and start over again. Like, this thing isn't good enough. It's not like this other shiny object I just saw at a conference, so we're just gonna burn it down and build this new thing. Which is, and people are excited, right? We're all excited to burn it down and start from scratch, because a product you can start from scratch is like working at a startup, but we don't work at a startup. And so the issue is not recognizing just how difficult it's going to be to sell that change to your users and roll it out to them. And so under-investing in the amount of time it takes to do that, but also investing in the amount of time it takes to measure and understand what's broken with what you have. So this is why things like outcome-driven innovation are such great tools. Because with something like that, you could actually say, I know, that thing over there, it really is pretty, and it's so shiny, and I just love it so much. But what is the unmet need that it is serving? And let me show you what the unmet needs of our key user roles are right now, and where our competitors are, and where we think there is extreme opportunity. And you can take ODI and you can actually extrapolate it out to pricing strategies, revenue models, business models. So there's numbers there that you could say, yeah, I know, we could spend $100 million burning this thing down and starting over. But how about we spend $1 million on this problem, because we think that's going to generate $25 million. So being able to have that conversation is very important, to be able to get people away from the look squirrel or look shiny object thing, but it happens everywhere. We just always have to check ourselves. Thank you.
Great, thank you.